Welcome to another edition of We Need to Talk About Movies, brought to you by banterflix.com. And now, here's your host, Jim McClean.
Hello, I'm your host, Jim McClean. Welcome to the latest episode of We Need to Talk About Movies. It's our first recording in quite some time, so it's good to be back. And on this recording, I'm joined by Banterflix's deputy editor, one half of our sleuth sisters. It's Joe Mc Elroy. How you, Joe?
Hi, Jim. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good, Joe. I feel a bit weird. I'm probably going to be a terrible host today because, as I just said to you before we started to record, I think this is our first recording for me anyway, for about 3 months, and that feels like a long time. So I've probably forgotten all my normal rambly skills, but let's see how it goes. But more importantly, Joe, how have you been this week? I know we'll not recap the past 3 months because we have been speaking over those 3 months, but how have you been recently, good sir?
I'm good. Nothing really to complain about. Things are going all right. Just glad things are reopening steadily and just enjoying going back to the cinema again after that wee break there. But that's pretty much it.
Joe, nobody likes someone who's like, I'm just happy with my lot. You want to hear people moan and groan. You know, this is the point where I segue in shamelessly, and this is an added bonus for anyone who gets to watch this. But so you might want to tell our listeners, it's a very personal thing, and this is me just literally putting it all out there. You've been having a bit of issue with your feet.
Yeah, I was gonna say literally, you've put your foot in it, Jim.
I have put my foot in it, but I don't.
But it's
care,
my
Joe.
foot. I just during lockdown, I had like a weird thing with my foot where it started with an illness in my stomach, and it sort of flared up, and I couldn't walk on it. And then I thought, oh God, I've got COVID in my foot. It's all just centralized in my foot. I'm going to die. But no. Essentially what happened was it just sort of flared up. But since then, it hasn't really gone down the swell now. I've been to the doctor, I've got my bloods, I'm just waiting for results and that. And now it's quite swollen. But yeah, we have been talking that it could be potentially a money-making venture. So, you know, toes crossed for that.
Can you cross your toes?
No, they're too swollen. It's like little cocktail sausages.
You see, the two things that come to mind when you talk about your feet there, Joe, is one of two things. You've either developed hobbit feet, so I don't know if you've been hanging out with many hobbits, or you're going a bit Sideshow Bob.
Well, it's not hobbit feet. They're not quite hairy enough, and I haven't been taken by a bunch of Urukai to Isengard, so it's definitely not hobbit feet. And it's not really Sideshow Bob. See, I keep looking down at it now. I'm just sort of examining it as I'm talking to you. I would say it's Sideshow Bob feet because it's not quite long enough. It's just like balloon. It's like literally my foot's become a balloon. Okay. But yeah, this is all riveting stuff for people who come to listen about films.
This is what people really come for. They don't really come for the reviews because they can go to like more well-established, kind of respectable outlets, you know, like Kermode and Mayo, the Empire Film Podcast. They can go to that, but they don't get to talk about feet on, you know, those movie podcasts. I don't know. Maybe they do. I know Kermode and Mayo go off on a few tangents, but I can't remember them talking about feet, Joe. No. I haven't really had any issues with my feet, so I can't really kind of come back at you with a kind of to and fro and much in that. But I'm glad that it's hopefully getting better.
Yeah. Fingers, toes crossed again.
But part of me wants to kind of jump on that foot to kind of see if the inflammation will just go somewhere else, or maybe it'll go to other feet. So you'll be left with not just one big feet, not just one big foot, but if we maybe pushed it down, you might end up with kind of two slightly bigger feet.
No, you probably just make it worse, to be honest.
Right, well,
I'm just trying to not like touch it or do anything with it.
Maybe not. Then we'll not try that. Okay, I guess by my probing of Joe's feet-related issues and his tentative ideas for maybe going down the OnlyFans foot route, I think
it's a Tarantino podcast, all right? You can talk about feet all we want.
Quentin would love that. Well, he kind of likes pretty feet. Joe. You know, I think I don't know. You know, from what you're picturing to us and what you're describing to us, it's not me. I don't know if I'd actually be really sad for you if Quentin had a look at those feet and kind of went, nah,
No. Well,
not for me.
well, that would just be like the final nail in the coffin for me. I'd be like, no, that it's just over. You know, I can't do anything with this. I can't sell it in any way. It's just useless and swollen.
Your only way to fame is to go down the Greatest Showman 2 route with Hugh Jackman. Just basically go and show Hugh, look at my big foot, Hugh. Can we make our millions from it? And he'd be like, nah, mate. I don't know why Hugh Jackman has a Belfast accent, but he's like, nah, mate, nah, not for me.
Yeah, get that fucking foot away from me.
Get that foot out of my fucking face.
Fucking stinking.
Right, okay. So I think with that, we shall move on to part 1 of the podcast. Okay, so part 1, Joe, this is where we talk a little bit about movie news, movie trailers. There's been a glut of late. I know that we were talking yesterday. Well, I was trying to mention it yesterday on our little WhatsApp feed. Somebody who shall remain nameless was a little obsessed with the whole Matt Hancock kind of debacle. Poor old Matt. But the Halloween Kills full trailer dropped yesterday with very little fanfare. And I've seen it. I know you've seen it. I know I've seen a couple other trailers. You're staying away from the Candyman trailer, which was released. We got the latest Marvel movie, isn't it? I can never say it. Shanghai and the 10 Rings have probably offended a lot of Marvel fans. If you want to email me, and my name's is Therese Ray, so that's the person to kind of email there. But anything of late, Joe, even beyond those trailers, if you want to just go straight and talk about Halloween Kills or any other movie news of late that's caught your attention?
Well, there's no news really as of late that sort of caught my attention. I think there was just mention of some, you know, I'm a big Western fan. There was announced that Walter Hill's going to be directing and writing a Western with Willem Dafoe and Christoph Waltz.
Okay. I hadn't heard this.
Yeah, no, it actually sounds pretty good. It's basically, I think Christoph Waltz is a bounty hunter, and he's tasked with hunting down this black man who's been accused of kidnapping a white woman. But when he catches up with him, he realizes, you know, that isn't the case. They've literally just run away together because they love each other. But obviously, you know, the whole given the racism at the time and all that there, it's just misconstrued. So then he's sort of facing the sort of dilemma is like, you know, does he complete his job and bring this guy back, or does he let them go? And all the while, somebody who he previously put away, I think it's Willem Dafoe's character, is sort of hunting them down as well because he sort of wants revenge. But actually, you know, on paper it sounds pretty good. So sort of looking forward to that one when it gets off the ground. But yeah, other than that, it's really just trailers and that have been sort of taking my focus.
Yeah, a couple of cracking trailers have been released. I know the one that we're all excited about is Sing 2. I know that kind of got released. And the trailer for Sing 2 featuring Bono. Joe. Bono plays a reclusive lion who is being lured out of retirement to come and perform. Look, I had a real soft spot for Sing when it came out. I really did. I know that I'm known on record in this podcast at crying at the drop of a hat. More on that later. But yeah, I had a soft spot for Sing. I was always surprised the sequel didn't get commissioned. Clearly has. I didn't know. And it seems to be rolling out pretty soon. I think it's out later this year. I'm not quite certain. I don't have the dates in front of me. But I know Bono's the big kind of star joining the cast this time. And yeah, you know, big up the Bonio. So go for it. I know that's not clearly the trailer we're all excited about. There has been a few. But just before we get into trailers, I seen, was it Jerry Seinfeld is going to be making the movie about the Pop-Tarts, the guy who invented Pop-Tarts. It's kind of one of those long standing jokes he's talked about. Is it Unfrosted, I think is the name. It's going to be kicking off next spring, and he's going to be directing it and writing it. I think he co-wrote it, and he's going to star in it as well. So I fucking love Jerry Seinfeld. I absolutely do. One of the things I got back into over lockdown one, remember the good old lockdowns when you thought it was all going to be over by Christmas last year, was Seinfeld, and I just forgot how genius it was. Genuinely forgot how genius it was. And my lovely wife, I've talked about this before in the podcast, her go-to get me to sleep movie is the B Movie, which is just the weirdest film ever. It's just the weirdest film of all time. And so I'm looking forward to that. I think it's, as I say, it's going to be next year. And if you need your Jerry Seinfeld fix, just watch Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. I don't know if you ever watched it, Joe.
No, last mean I'm sort of very agnostic when it comes to Jerry Seinfeld in general. Like I've never seen Seinfeld, I've never seen B Movie. It's not because I haven't wanted to. It's just one of those things that just I haven't got around to that yet, or just haven't done. So I might start with this Pop-Tart movie.
If only there'd been a period of time when all been at home where maybe you'd finally got the opportunity to watch stuff that you always wanted to watch, or in my case, sometimes show stuff to my lovely wife, who I think, I love this. Let's watch this together, only to be told after like 2 episodes, nah. That was her response to Twin Peaks. It was like, nah, I don't really want to watch this. And you're like, just have to watch this box set that I've just bought on my own. I've bought just for the sake of watching it with you on my own. But yes. So in our rambly way, Halloween Kills, Joe. The trailer got released. I'm fairly upbeat about it. I know I'm on record as being not a huge fan of the 2018 reboot. It had its good moments, it had its terrible moments, and then it had, I forget the name of the doctor, the stupid doctor in Halloween.
No, yeah.
That the character they created to kind of, to an extent, replace Loomis. And every time I think of him, I just go. But anyway, he spoiler for the 2018 film, kids. He's not going to be in this one. Spoiler.
His head kind of went.
Yeah, his head kind of went kersplat. So he's not going to be in this one. And reading the brief, like, this is the first of 2 more installments that supposedly will finish the franchise. Of course, it won't if it makes money. They'll find some way to bring Michael back. But it's been shot back to back with, there's Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends. We were meant to have Halloween Kills last year. We should have been getting Halloween Ends this year. But now we're just getting the first of the 2. So, having watched the trailer, Joe, are you excited? You and I are both huge John Carpenter fans, and we've written a piece. Might want to talk about that for Fright Club NI on their website. You and I are both huge John Carpenter fans. We're huge fans of the Halloween franchise. Some of us like Halloween 4, some of us don't. But what's your thoughts on what you've seen? I know trailers lie. There's not much to go on, but what do you think?
Fairly positive on it as a whole. It seems a bit strange though, because the first, in the reboot, sort of tried to establish again that tone of Michael just stalking people slowly and building more in suspense than actual gore. Whereas some of the sequels went in the opposite direction, especially the Rob Zombie ones. But now this seems to be going more towards the gore again, and the zombie-esque thing. It's like Michael's just seems to become like, it seems to show more now. He's just a force of nature, and he'll just kill absolutely anything that just gets in his way. But no, having said that, I'm still fairly positive on it. I kind of like the spin that, it seems like the whole of Haddonfield is going to try and hunt him down. It's like the whole hunters become the hunted thing. So as a whole, I'm sort of positive about it. I'm just kind of curious to see where it's going to go from here.
Yeah. Oh, pardon me. Yeah, I would agree with you on the violence. It seems to be steering away from the idea of Carpenter's original that, you don't show things to viewers, because what, a viewer will fill in the gaps much more horribly than you can ever do when you're showing stuff on screen. Although it doesn't look too much like it's going to be over the top, kind of over the top violence in the style of Rob Zombie's. I was tempted to cut across you earlier on and say, what are these Rob Zombie movies you talk about it? And we haven't even mentioned that, isn't Rob Zombie making the Monsters movie?
Oh yeah, they're all going to be like rednecks swearing at each other or something like that now.
Oh fuck!
You know what? It'll happen.
You know what? It's probably going to be great, and that's going to be the sad thing. It's going to be like when Guy Ritchie does a film and he's told you can't do everything that you want to do. You have to do something that's quite kind of, this is linear and this is what we want you to do. And he produces something quite good. And then he kind of goes off and becomes full Guy Ritchie again. I don't know, but we'll not talk about that. But I don't know. It's a bit like the Candyman trailer, and I know you haven't seen the Candyman trailer. Have you seen anything of Candyman?
Well, from what I have seen, it seems like it's sort of like the spirit of Candyman haunting things, but he's not directly involved as he would have been saying any of the other previous films. I just want to keep that secret because, it's sort of like something that you told me is like, you like to leave like one film you're looking forward to as a treat and not spoil it in any way with trailers or whatnot. But yeah, I'm just wondering how they're going to approach that there, because the first one's like very gothic in that, and then the second one's still pretty good, and then we'll not talk about the third one. And I'm just wondering how this one's going to pan out then, if it's sort of like the spirit of Candyman haunt things.
I don't know, because the first trailer that they released with isn't it Say My Name kind of, and it was all kind of cut to the beats of that. I thought looked great, and then they had that little kind of puppet kind of character kind of trailer that was released that was showing a little bit of the kind of shadow puppets, the mythology of Candyman. I was like, oh, this looks really good, and as you say, it kind of looks much more like that gothic tone that was all about the atmosphere in the first Candyman. The latest trailer, it does look a little bit more like it's going a little bit like the Halloween Kills route, where it's going to be maybe not outright gory, but definitely that kind of over the top violence, and that doesn't scare me. I'm just being honest, that doesn't scare me, and that's my one fear with Halloween Kills, that I mightn't get scared. Look, as I said before, I liked the previous Halloween film. I didn't love it. I think there's a few kind of narrative decisions that are just terrible and ill-advised, but I think it kind of did the job it had to do. It kind of reinvented the franchise or rejuvenated the franchise, so it's interesting to see where they go now. But looking at the trailer and that idea of Haddonfield rising up against Michael Myers, and there's stuff about the more Michael kills, the less human he becomes, it reminds me of some of the ditched concepts that we had, and I know you've read it, as have I, the Taking Shape Part 2, where it kind of talks about the sequels that never were, and even in Taking Shape, where it talks about some of the sequels to the later films where they borrowed the idea, and there's kind of is there gateways to hell underneath the Myers household and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
it's going to be interesting because, of course, because we know we know two things. We know that with Halloween Kills, there's going to be Halloween Ends. So we know there's probably going to be a cliffhanger ending of sorts. It's going to be interesting how they kind of create that level of tension when I know we always know, well, Michael's not going to actually die. He's going to come back.
Yeah.
He's going to come back somehow. He's going to have swap places with a fireman or paramedic or something. That's what he does. Or, Busta Rhymes will maybe come in and kind of kick shit out. Isn't it Busta Rhymes? No, maybe it's not. No, it's not. It is
Busta Rhymes. Yeah, trick or treat, motherfucker.
Yeah, Busta Rhymes will come in and kick the shit out of him, and it's not really, it's not really Busta Rhymes. It's, I don't know.
To get Tyrese from Fast and Furious, he'll come on board.
Yeah, he can do that role. It's going to be interesting how they create that sense of kind of tension when there's going to be a third one, and it's going to be interesting if the third one follows on this idea of set right after the predecessor, because I know we'll be talking about that with A Quiet Place Part 2. I don't know. I'm going to be quietly optimistic. Yeah, I agree with you, Joe. It feels like there's a bit of on-screen nastiness. I think the trailer shows an awful lot, and I don't think it needs to. I don't think it really needs to, but the sequence at the start of the trailer with the firemen kind of looks great.
Yeah.
Who hasn't wanted to see Michael Myers with one of those big fuck off chainsaw things that they use for cutting people out of cars?
Exactly.
It's up there. Isn't it Friday the 13th? It's the first with Kane Hodder when he gets the lawnmower. Doesn't he use at one point, or is it a huge strimmer?
Yeah, it's something like that.
Yeah, it's up there with kind of like things you didn't know you wanted until you finally seen them. So yeah, so I'm excited. We'll move on to the movies. Joe, anything else kind of very quickly before we go that maybe has caught your attention or got you excited at all?
Well, it's sort of still trailer based. The latest Suicide Squad trailer.
Oh,
I'm thinking it's, well, I know with it, I'm sort of cautiously optimistic because, and given James Gunn's track record, you'd think it's should be something pretty great, and the cast, is fantastic that they have for it. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, I kind of was looking forward to David Ayer's version, and then it's slowly unraveled before unraveling, in the actual big screen. So it's one of those ones I'm cautiously optimistic about.
Release the Ayer cut. Is that what you're gonna start that? I think that's already started anyway.
No, bury it at the bottom of the deepest ocean and never let it surface again, because that's where that film belongs in general. There's no way you can improve that whatsoever.
Along with Zack Snyder, just bury him and all the copies of the original version of Suicide Squad, and just say, look, we can't get it, guys. I'm sorry. Just jettison it off to space, put it into the Forbidden Zone so only Superman can find it. And no, I don't know. I mean, I love James Gunn. I mean, I absolutely love James Gunn, and it's not just because before I probably had started Bannerflix. It's not just because he replied to a tweet to me once when, after watching Guardians 2, I tweeted him about, why did you have to make me cry? But granted, his response, Joe, was outstanding when he just was like, sorry, man. But like something like that. But it wasn't like this long-winded kind of emotional response. I was just like, James Gunn's all right. He tweeted back to me. But I love what he did with the two Guardians films. Guardians 2's a little bit on the mess side, but there's enough there for me to love it. I love Slither. I adore Slither. I'm excited about it. I like that it seems to be carrying across the essence from the Harley Quinn character from what we got set up with Birds of Prey. I know a lot of people don't like Birds of Prey. I seem to be one of the few people that champions it every chance I get. I think it's fantastic. I know it underwhelmed at the box office, but I think that's when you take the, don't want to sound woke, but you take the male gaze aspect away from the Harley Quinn character, you can see you have a lot to play with, and it looks like James Gunn's kind of carrying that over into this film. And I just love Margot Robbie's character, and we've also got a man shark. I don't know what his character's called. I forget. I think it's
King Shark or something.
King Shark, yes, and he's voiced by Sly Stallone. So what's not to like? What's not to like about that? And it's a 15 certificate. It looks like it's going to have a bit of bite to it. Definitely if you watch the Red Band trailer. So yeah, and with that, we shall move on to part 2 of the pod.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay, baby. Aw. Yeah. What is happening? Oh my God! It's okay. It's okay. We're okay. We're okay. That's Dad. Okay. That's Dad. Where? Mom. Oh my God!
So that's a clip of Quiet Place Part 2. This is the only film of the 3 we're going to very quickly talk about, Joe, that we've both seen. There's only film that we're going to be talking about that you and I have both seen, and not much really to set up. It's a sequel to Quiet Place, kicks off straight after the predecessor, and this installment, to an extent, once again directed and written by John Krasinski, aka Jim from The Office, is set kind of just before the first film and set minutes after the previous, and it kind of opens up that world that we had been seen, that had been hinted at from before. Long awaited. I've been looking forward to it a long time. I'll hold off just sharing my thoughts just for now, Joe, but what did you think of A Quiet Place Part 2?
I really liked it. Just getting that out there straight away. For me, it's a case of, how you'll feel about this one is how you feel about the first one. If you really like the first one, I think you'll enjoy this one just as much. I really liked how they tried to expand things a bit, and the introduction of Cillian Murphy's character, and his relationship within the characters that sort of was pre-existing, and it still manages, despite the premise of being already established. You know, it's still, the thread of these things is still there, even though it feels like it's a little bit more action orientated, because there is a way of, you know, killing them now, and they sort of established that at the end of the first one. But for me, the thing I actually really love most, I really like the opening sequence, the sort of prequel, as it were. It's sort of set in day one of this whole invasion. You know, the way they're at the baseball game and they have something to see, you know, the meteor or whatever it is in the sky. It kind of reminded me a bit of Spielberg in a way. It felt a bit Spielbergian. But yeah, overall, I think it works just as well as the first one. You know, the tensions there, it still has a, you know, a great deal of heart, and but that's sort of balanced by the score, which is very similar to the first one. I think it's the same composer. Is it Mark Beltrami? I think I can never pronounce his name, but yeah, overall, I really, really enjoyed it, and for me, it was like a great way to go back to cinemas again. Like, you know, people were like saying, "Oh, Tenet's going to save cinema." It's like, no, it's films like this. It's films like this, you know, that are like real sort of crowd pleasers, and you know, it's one of those things you have to see with an audience to really appreciate as much as possible. Same with, I know we'll probably mention later, Fast Nine's similar in that respect. You know, it's best enjoyed as a shared experience on the big screen, and this works brilliantly, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I would agree with some of the things you're saying. I would maybe disagree with one thing, not massively, but just kind of as a minor niggle. I think just kind of in what you said about Tenet saving cinema, I know I said that a lot, and I know we did a few podcasts. We did a podcast. I know we had a podcast with you on at the time, Joe, talking about Tenet. And I think the thing that always was acting against Tenet was the budget of the film. I think that's when you have a mega budget film like that, you need to go into silly dollars. You know, you need to go into Disney dollars to kind of really save cinema. The fact is, A Quiet Place Part 2, well, it's clearly a bigger budget second time round. It doesn't have a huge budget, so therefore its profit area is going to be much, much bigger for any studio. So therefore it will be seen as a bigger, you know, sign of the love of cinema that gets bums on seats. My lovely wife and I saw it. It was our first trip back to cinema after the closures again. I think it was the same with you, Joe. It was your first trip back in. I thought it was great. I thought it works really well as a double bill. Like, I mean, you could literally just go straight out of A Quiet Place and go into A Quiet Place Part 2, and it really works well, other than, of course, the obvious issues of like the two kids have clearly aged quite a bit between the two, but that's, you know, kids do unfortunately grow up. That's, you know, unless you're Peter Pan. But my only minor niggle is if I would disagree with on the opening sequence. I think the opening sequence works well. I think it's a good sequence, but it did feel something like me in my mind that was John Krasinski had maybe got that idea for the original, and they've kind of looked at the budget and said, look, we don't have the budget for this. We can't do this sequence. We need to do something a little bit different. And that's why then that when you counter it to the opening sequence of A Quiet Place, when it's so quiet. I mean, I like that aspect of the fact in the first film, the opening sequence is so quiet and there's nothing is said, I think, for a good maybe 5-10 minutes, maybe longer, because it's all through sign language. And it's the use of noise. Like, I mean, the noise, without going into spoilers, of that little spaceship going off, it just sounds like a bomb has went off. And I like the fact that there's that tonal change, you know, from the first one, which was so quiet, to this one, which is so kind of loud and noisy and chaotic. But part of me just felt like it, in my head, I don't know, I haven't spoke to John Krasinski about this. John, you know, him and me are great mates. But I would love to know if that was something that was a hangover from the first film that they'd maybe wanted to do, and because of budgeting issues and pacing issues, and he wanted to have the focus on the family itself, that it worked. And I think the only other purpose really that opening sequence served, which probably works well, is to retcon in Cillian Murphy's character and his, you know, relationship with isn't it the Abbott family? Isn't that what they're called? I couldn't remember earlier on. I mean, I think he's great. The Cillian Murphy is a dreamboat. I would love to have his eyes. You know, I'm as obsessed with his eyes as Chris Nolan is. You know, any film that Cillian Murphy's in, Nolan, I think, always tries to focus in on his eyes. We're talking about Quentin Tarantino being obsessed with feet. You know, Old Knowles is obsessed with Old Kills. Don't know why I'm going with those kind of cool nicknames as if they're great mates. Next time I interview Kills, I'll be like, "Yo, Kills, what's up, man?" But
Get out.
yeah. All right, Kills, what's going to be happening in the next season of Peaks? And he'll just be like, "No, mate, here, get the fuck." But I liked it. I liked it a lot, and I like what John Krasinski is clearly interested in, and he clearly understands that motif of we get scared because we care. I know I use that sentence far too much in this pod, but this is the essence. A Quiet Place and A Quiet Place Part 2 should be just used as a teaching tool for filmmakers when they're writing horrors, and like you get scared because you care about these people and you care about this family, and the idea of family and paternal responsibility is so strong in both films that's where the payoff comes. I do think slightly underwhelmed in the way it concludes itself, because I do feel like we're still kind of where we were. Almost, yes, so I know we've kind of got a way to defeat these horrible scribblies, but it's going to be interesting because I know A Quiet Place Part 3 has been confirmed. John Krasinski isn't directing. It's, oh God, who's directing it? It's Midnight. Jeff Nichols, who did Midnight Run, which I love. I think is a film. I think he's a really interesting filmmaker. Mud is another film about characters you care about. It's going to be interesting is if that film carries on with the Abbott family, or if it tries to even open out the world even more. Like this film, it doesn't do what Aliens did to Alien. It doesn't try to expand the mythology of the Gribblies that much. It goes basically from the first one, which is basically in Alien, Texas Chainsaw in Space, to Aliens, which is just a war movie. But I like it a lot. There's some great sequences. I would have liked a little bit more Emily Blunt, if I'm really honest. I think she's given little to do in this installment, and it probably helps when you're the director's wife, that maybe you can get away with getting an actress of that caliber and not giving her too much to do. Although there's a great sequence with her, I don't want to spoil too much, and a confrontation with a Gribbly and a lot of water, which is choreographed really, really well. And it's interesting you mentioned about Spielberg, because I know Krasinski has talked about Jurassic Park being a huge influence on the first film. So there's probably a sense of truth that he's someone who's clearly been influenced by Spielberg. I don't know. I've rambled on a bit, Joe. Anything you want to kind of come back at me, shout at me, maybe come up with new interesting nicknames for our kills that we can come up with and take it from there?
Murph Dog himself. No, I kind of disagree with you when it comes to the end. And like in terms, from an actual story point of view, you're absolutely right. Nothing's really changed. We know how to kill these things, but it's just it ends where it ends. I think from a character point of view, though, there's a greater arc sort of at work. When that's the thing. It's hard to talk about the end without spoiling it, but in terms of like the brother character, where he starts in the film from where he ends, and the same with even the daughter. I think that's what really clinched it for me at the end. I love that ending for that reason. In terms of
well, hang on, let me just jump across you. I mean, I agree. I mean, I had an emotional response. Again, I don't want to talk too much with the ending. I will say this. I know it does venture into spoiler territory. I did turn to my lovely wife at one point and say, if anything happens to Emily Blunt in this character, in this film, we riot. Literally, if anything happens to Blunt, we riot. So as you can clearly tell, listeners and viewers, there was no rioting. Well, was there any rioting report in Belfast? Or let's not go there. But no, there was no rioting at the Odeon. So, we can kind of talk around that as much as possible. Noah Jupe, I think that's the actor, Marcus. I liked his arc, but fuck, he's an annoying wee shite of a kid.
Oh, yeah. I mean, no, don't get me wrong. Like, throughout, you're like, you fucking idiot. Don't do that. You're constantly doing, like, shaking your hands at him. One bad mistake after another. But that's why it sort of makes it a bit more satisfying by the end. It's like, you know what? You kind of come in your own. Well done. Yeah. Good for you.
Yeah. Yeah, but come on, Joe. There's a sequence early on without going spoilery where something happens and you're like, fuck it, leave him.
Yeah. I don't know.
Just leave him. Everybody likes Regan. Melissa Simmons, I think is her name.
Oh, she's fantastic.
She's just outstanding. And I mean, there's a sequence in the film where she just carries it. I mean, it is because the focus goes to her, because that's another slight niggle, but I understand it. There's kind of the sequel trope of kind of sending kind of people off on their own little journeys. It kind of makes sense in this without going into spoiler. But there's a sequence with her and then Cillian Murphy is great, and it's a nice kind of contrast between the relationship that existed with her and her father. I mean, there's lots of interesting things at place. I think my gripe with the ending isn't kind of it's the idea of kind of, you know, at its heart, it's about parental responsibility, about parents being proud of the men and women their children become, and kind of how they progress from child to adulthood. You know, there's all those interesting things in there, and the soundtrack, as you've mentioned earlier on, really does pull on the heartstrings because it's knowingly drawing back to incidents from the first film. I just think in its grand arc, I think it's kind of a bit underwhelming. But then you sit back and you've got to say, well, this has taken place over probably like 3-4 days. You know, really, I don't think there's a massive time gap between the start of the first film to this. So, you know, are you really going to bring about, you know, the end of this alien invasion in 3-4 days? Let's be a bit realistic, Jim. I just felt, if I can save myself in a way, I was emotionally affected. I thought I had emotional engagement with the finale. I just think it's setting itself up for A Quiet Place 3.
Yeah.
If that, rather than trying to resolve itself, it's trying to, you know, lay the foundations possibly for further adventures of the Abbott family. But fuck it, I've no problem with that. If you can keep the quality going for A Quiet Place Part 3, 4, 5, I'll be on board. But I don't know if you can keep. I suppose that's what I mean. I don't know if you can keep getting away with that each time. Like, I mean, I don't want to see a similar narrative beat in A Quiet Place Part 3, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Like things, you know, I think a lot of things would have to change by the time you get to the third one to sort of keep it interesting. From what I know, this third one Jeff Nichols is doing, it's supposed to be a spin-off, but they're still planning another Abbott family film sort of down the road. I think maybe it's a case of maybe they're letting the kids grow up a bit and they're going to set it maybe a few years in the future, just from what I've briefly read about it. But that's just an idea that's being thrown out there.
Maybe they'll take some influence from the Terminator franchise, because look how well it worked out when they had adult John Connor.
Oh yeah, which one?
All of them.
we've had about for every film there's a new one, but
that's what I want. But anyway, so I think we're both really positive about A Quiet Place Part 2. It's not a spoiler pod, so I don't really want to go into spoiler beats, but you know, the other possibly savior of cinema, I know every kind of person who works in a cinema hates it when I say stuff like that, this film will save cinema, but Fast and Furious 9, you've seen it, I haven't. I'm going to go see it over the weekend based on what you tell me now, Joe. I'm going to decide whether I'm going to go see it or not. So give us a little bit of setup for Fast and Furious 9 and what you thought.
Right. Well, Fast and Furious 9, it's yet another adventure for the Fast and Furious family. Basically, it's a case now, you know, Dom and Liddy are living a quiet life in their wee country farm. It's a bit like The Quiet Place, you know, it's that kind of setup. But then a figure from Dom's past comes to light, and it all revolves around this chase for a MacGuffin that can be used for global domination. So that sets in motion a lot of car chases, a lot of magnetism, a lot of physics-defying action and stunts, and that's basically it. When it comes to Fast 9, you don't really need to know much more.
Has your head fully recovered?
It's like I told you just before this, you know, my brain sort of leaked out during the film, but I've managed to sort of just, you know, put it back in there. But that's not a bad thing, you know, just getting that out there straight away. It's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, we need films like this here, just sheer big, dumb entertainment. And that's what Fast 9 is. I really enjoyed it for what it was like.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I wasn't a huge fan of Fast and Furious 8. I mean, I adore Fast and Furious 7. I really do. I can't remember the name of the director. It's what do you call it? James Wan, I think, directed Fast and Furious.
Justin Lin.
Justin Lin, yeah, because he's back for this one. Isn't that the way it's worked?
Yeah, he's come back, and I think he's going to do the last of them as well.
Okay, it's not going to be the last, Joe. They're never gonna end. It's like any film, when it makes big money at the box office, a studio will go, we have a way to kind of reinvent this. Let's just use time travel. Fuck it. He was a twin. I don't know. Other ideas. Fuck it. It was all a dream. And they'll find a way of carrying on the franchise. But you looked at me like as if to say,
no,
Jimmy,
funny you say that. I heard a great theory, right, about the whole series. From the end of the first, where the first film ends with Dom's car flipping and he nearly dies in it. Somebody said the whole series is just his fever dream life flashing before his eyes. From the second film onwards.
So what you could do then is, if it's revealed at the end of Fast and Furious 10, unless you just spoiled Fast and Furious 9, that it's all a dream, then
no, it's just
in Fast and Furious 11 could then just be kicking up from the end of that fever dream. Boom, there you go. That's it. You've done it again, Howard. That's it sorted. I'm, as I say, I'm tempted by this. I'm not going to lie. I'm probably going to go see it. Although, when I went to cinema last night to see my movie of choice, In the Heights, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, the queues were on. It was like pre kind of COVID kind of things. I've never seen the cinema. I've never seen the cinema busier. Probably the last time I seen it as busy was Rise of Skywalker, or I'm trying to think of something that's happened since that was pre-COVID, or Avengers Endgame. There's one there. It was, the Odeon was queued out the door because, of course, you have to do your track and trace, and that's slowing everything up. And then there's just queues because everybody wants their crap for the cinema. And a film like Fast and Furious 9, I'm assuming, Joe, you're going to want to munch your popcorn.
Oh yeah, that's what it is. Just big dumb blockbuster popcorn film. It's ideal for that,
Yeah, I'm intrigued. I think I said that. I don't think I've asked you, but how much will my head hurt when I'm watching this? How much will I have to just sit and go, right? I always talk about if I'm in a kind of low place, which I have been over the last 3 months for various reasons. I used to say, right, I go to the cinema. That's why I missed cinema a couple of months ago, really, particularly because I would go to cinema, watch something loud and dumb, Kong versus Godzilla being something I would have definitely went to go see in the cinema in early April. I would have kind of left my emotional baggage at the kind of ticket desk, went and watched something for like 2.5 hours, been entertained, felt my IQ levels drop, and then come back and pick up my emotional baggage by the end of the movie, and hope that emotional baggage is a little bit smaller and I'm feeling a little bit bigger. So if I paraphrase that kind of story or kind of analogy I've used before, if I just kind of hand over my brain as I walk in and they check my ticket at the ticket desk and I go and sit in my cinema seat, how much will my just head hurt from the nonsense, from the on-screen nonsense?
Well, it won't hurt because your brain's gone. It's out. It's checked out. It's sitting at the waiting desk. The nonsense works as well as you're willing to buy into it. Okay, that's the same with any of these films, right? Be it the fifth one with a bloody safe going around the streets of Rio, or a tank chasing them in the sixth one, and then whatever it is. The thing is, the more you're willing to buy into it, the more fun you're going to have with it. But the thing is, for me, it was basically after the first like big action sequence where I just went, you know what, fuck it, just here we go. Like, the stupider it got, the more fun I had. Right. And you know what the thing is, it is, that analogy you had is great for it, because you can just leave your sort of worries at the door, just sit down and just have fun with it if you're willing to have fun with it. But if people are going to be like snarky about it and just go, oh, well, that's stupid, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do the other, you're like, no, you're missing the point. These films were never meant to be, a case of, what you can and can't do. There's actually a scene in it, just remembered, where they actually go a bit meta about it and realize, like, wait a minute, we should have been dead by now so many different times. And they talk about it, but it's actually a pretty funny scene. But in general, it is a case of, the more you're willing to buy in it, the more entertainment you're going to get from it.
Okay, you're selling this to me. I know one of the things I remember reading about Fast and Furious 9, Michelle Rodriguez, who I just love as a performer, was a bit hesitant to come back because of the portrayal of women. I know you only saw this last night. Is that something that is improved upon in this? I know Helen O'Hara posted a kind of like I think about 3 or 4 tweets in a row about the film after she watched it, and she said, like, my brain is still kind of like got an ice cream headache from watching the film, but I know it's stupid. I know it's kind of all the things you're saying, but I liked it. And she actually said it's a film that actually a big blockbuster action movie that actually passes the Bechdel test as well. So I mean, that's something that's coming from the editor at large, I think is her term at Empire magazine. Helen O'Hara, film critic, I respect a hell of a lot. So just kind of your initial kind of thoughts. Did you see anything from? Did you see an improvement from? Okay, we've had Michelle Rodriguez, we've had Gal Gadot in the Fast and Furious franchise as well. A lot of the time, the franchise is guilty of just leering at scantily clad ladies in very little. I'm going to imagine that it's not going to change that much. I'm going to imagine there's still a bit of that going on. But did you notice any tonal shifts, any differences on it, particularly for like Michelle Rodriguez's character?
Well, yeah, funny you say that. Brett, I can't remember the actress's name, but it's Brian's wife in the franchise. She returns, but the reason she returns is because Brian has to stay home and watch the kids. So it's a case of, it reverses that trope, but it's more to do with sort of necessity given, the tragic circumstances around Paul Walker. So you did notice that and you're like, oh, well, you know what? I know that's the reason behind it, but it is a nice change. And she sort of goes off on her own wee side quest with Letty to try and locate something in Tokyo. And it's a small segment of the film, but it works well. So I definitely see where Helen O'Hara is coming from with that, from that respect. However, there is one thing; it kind of perpetuates a stereotype. There's a chase, I think it's in Edinburgh, where the main female hacker, she was in Game of Thrones. I can never remember her name. I think it's Natalie something or other. Basically, she has to chase someone down because she's the only person who can, who's around at the minute. But we find out she can't drive very well. So it's kind of perpetuating the stereotype, oh, bad women drivers. But the thing is, she comes in their own throughout the sequence and, she saves the day, as it were. So they kind of take that trope and they kind of turn it in its head by the end of the chase. So in a way, what Helen O'Hara, it sort of does ring true with this film, and it has come a long way when you think about even the first few installments with scantily clad women in a beach or whatever, just dancing in the background. They're basically just set decorations at times rather than actual people. There's one sequence at like a party where there's women dancing, but it's very short and brief. I think it's just sort of keeping some sort of tradition with the previous films without being gratuitous. But there is a cameo as well from a famous female singer, and her level of acting, no offense to her, it's up there with Tommy Wiseau. When you see her, you're like, I'm actually listening into a female Tommy Wiseau talking to me right now. I don't know what you're saying, but you'll know it when you see it. I'm not going to spoil it.
Let me guess, right? And you can tell me if I get it right. Let me guess. Annie Lennox.
No. Oh,
okay. No, don't tell me. No, don't tell me.
No, I'm not telling you.
I'm going to have 3 guesses, and you can't tell me who it is, but just tell me if I'm right or wrong. Okay. So I've guessed Annie Lennox.
Annie Lennox is out there.
Let me see. Bjork.
No, it's not Bjork. Sorry, just when I think about who it actually is, it's like the polar opposite.
Okay, polar opposite of Bjork. Beyonce.
No, but you're a bit closer. And we'll leave it there.
Okay, I've that to look forward to. So that's you've definitely sold Fast and Furious 9 for me. I was always going to go see it. I'm not going to lie, but last night the queues were a bit too much for the film, and it's weird actually. Have you find it weird that I know when cinemas reopened last year after lockdown 1.0, and I know briefly after lockdown 2.0, there was the 2 meter rule, but that's relaxed now to 1 meter. Have you found that just before? I know I'm going to be talking and wrapping up the movie section with In the Heights, but have you found that weird with the 1 meter rule, particularly in a film like Fast and Furious 9, which I'd imagine in your screening you see it at the Odeon. Mm-hmm. Other cinemas are of course available, but I know Amber and I went to see Cruella last week, and it was it was a little weird at first being surrounded again by so many people. Like there was people in front of us, people behind us. It wasn't the 2 meter rule. It didn't feel as socially distanced. We kept our mask on the whole way through it, other than when I was inhaling Maltesers. But that's a story for another time. But I find it a bit weird at first having people that I didn't know. I mean, it's lovely in a way, and I'll come back to that later on. But it's lovely in a way, kind of being able to hear other people's response to certain motifs and key plot points in films. But have you found it weird, the 2 meter rule being reduced to a meter?
Well, the thing is, if I haven't really noticed it too much for when I've been to cinema so far, like I've been twice for A Quiet Place and then last night for Fast 9. We were lucky enough, when we went, there was no one really around us at all. So
there's just no room for them with your foot.
That's what it is. I just like waved the foot about. That kind of, that just reminds. Sorry, you're just giving me Tenant flashbacks from when your fella did that in the QFT. Maybe that's a little something for the segment at the end. But
I thought you were going to say you're giving me flashbacks of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. When
Margot Robbie's dirty feet.
Yeah, when she goes to cinema.
Yeah. No, it's not quite that. Although, give me her feet over this guy's feet any day. Because never mind, not getting in that. But yeah, I haven't really noticed it too much. So I felt fairly comfortable. I haven't really.
I didn't feel uncomfortable. It was just, it was nice and close. It was both nice and weird, if that makes sense. Because when we went to see A Quiet Place Part 2, I think the rule was still 2 meters. I think it's only recently it's come down to 1 meter.
Oh, right.
And it was when we went to see Cruella, we were like, this cinema is really full. Like, I mean, I've been surprised at what Cruella has done at cinemas, because I mean, we try to pre-book. As I say, we both have limitless cards. Other cinemas have unlimited cinema things available, but we couldn't for ages get seating together with limitless with Cruella. So we just happened to go. I think it was last Saturday we went to go see it. I liked it a lot. I know my lovely wife wasn't a fan, but she's not a fan of Emma Stone. I have tried to convince her that she's wrong, but that's never going to work. But I mean, I thought Cruella was great. I think it does borrow from not the tonal aspects and the key things from Todd Phillips' Joker, but I think it borrows heavily from the narrative. There's some key narrative plot points that definitely borrow or just weirdly similar to Todd Phillips' Joker and Cruella. And I think Emma Stone's great in it, but it was weird in that screening being so close back to people that you didn't know. And then last night, as I say, we went to see In the Heights, and there will be the group that will come back to Cinema Wanker of the Week, but the less said about that for now, for better, which I suppose brings me nicely into what I went to see. It was In the Heights, which is an adaptation of the Broadway play. It's the music is based on Lin-Manuel Miranda, who seems to be able to do no wrong. Everything he seems to touch just turns to magic. I think this play predates Hamilton. So I think a lot of fans of Hamilton are coming to this because I don't know if In the Heights was as big a success. I'm not a huge Broadway aficionado. Clearly was enough of a success to launch his career on Broadway, but I don't know if it just had the same cultural impact that something like Hamilton had. And I know I've watched Hamilton on Disney Plus over lockdown. And the basic motif of the film is it tells the story of the inhabitants of Washington Heights, this small little street. It does kind of borrow quite heavily from the kind of tonal or the narrative style of Spike Lee's. I was actually reminded of 2 Spike Lee films when I was watching it. Do the Right Thing, of course, just because you have that hot American city, and you can feel the heat in every scene. And there's an impending. The film keeps telling us it's 2 days, 3 days, 2 days, not days, to an impending blackout. So you kind of have things similar there to what's going on in Do the Right Thing. It's not at all like Do the Right Thing. It's much more family focused, family orientated. It's given that very simple, and I know it's cliched thing, and I know it sounds like a woke thing, but just given representation on screen and letting people tell their stories, and from different backgrounds. You have different cultures, different ethnicities, all in this small little kind of Washington, all this the small part of New York, Washington Heights. They're telling their stories. They just happen to be singing it. If you've seen Hamilton, you'll know that kind of musical style. Some people like it, some people don't like that. Like kind of, hello, my name is Jim. I am here to do a podcast. I can't really do it. That's why I didn't make it in Broadway. You and I have both done a bit of theater, Joe. I don't know if you've ever done musical side of theater. Have you done musical theater?
When I was very young, we did a version of Aladdin. I was one of the policemen in it. There was we had our song about being part of the Peking police. But actually, looking back in hindsight, that was a bit of a dodgy play because there was a lot of, we were made to look a bit Asian. We'll just say that. And in hindsight, I'm like, oh God, I hope those photos never resurface.
Well, I'll not lie. When you said you were the police in the Aladdin play, I was kind of thinking, is there a famous policeman? I was thinking of just you all dressed up as characters from The Bill.
I would have loved that more. It's less dodgy anyway than bloody doing that other thing. But no, it was kind of like in the actual film Aladdin, they have their waistcoats and the big puffy trousers. It's sort of like that, only more Asian oriented. I don't know
racist.
Why it was
more
I
racist.
I don't know why it's set in Asia because I thought it was an Arabic tale to begin with. So I don't know why they moved the action to China in our musical. Anyway, so we've done that.
I think it says more about your drama teacher, whoever. Okay, so you've done musical theater. I've done a little bit. I remember doing we had a drama teacher who was a bit weird, and he wrote his own plays. And he did a variation of The Sound of Music called The Sound of Musings, but it was if Snow White was set in Northern Ireland. And I had to play Grumpy the dwarf. And basically Grumpy, because it's Northern Ireland, had to be based in Ian Paisley. So I had to sing a little bit I had to sing a little bit as Ian Paisley. And then I can't remember the name of the second play we did. No, I'm telling a lie because there's The Sound of Musings, which is the play based on The Sound of Music, where I had to pretend to be Christopher Pike's character and I had to sing Edelweiss, which was just like if there was a cat in the room, just cat, dog, you'd have heard it yowl everywhere. I can't remember the name of the Northern Irish variation of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs whenever I was basically Grumpy, the Protestant kind of... Say no more.
Ulster says no to Snow White.
Ulster says no! All that stuff. Yes!
I just like to say.
The secret is, and I haven't done a good Paisley in a while. I haven't done a good Paisley ever, but you have to get a wee whistle in there somewhere when you're talking. You have to
slightly,
yes,
slight whisper.
But we're going down a tangent. So, in the Heights, like Hamilton, it's that kind of almost kind of rap melody to the music. I don't know. Have you seen Hamilton?
No, I haven't. Again, this is me apparently wasting lockdown.
Yeah,
with this list of things I should watch and I haven't watched.
It's, as I say, Hamilton, I think works well. I've talked about this before. I have this issue, and I feel like I'm going a really roundabout way and talking about In the Heights. So, when I watched Hamilton on Disney, I think it was late last year, I think it was released on Disney Plus. Watch it over 2 sittings because it's quite long. It's 4 hours, 4 hours long. And you're watching a recording with an audience watching it, and you kind of go to yourself going, it's great and I really like it, I like the music, but I wish I was actually there watching it rather than watching a recording of other people watching it, if that makes sense. It makes sense in my head, and you kind of watch when you still watch Hamilton, you go, that's quite clever, the clever use of the space, the clever use of how they've got a minimalist cast and how they're playing a multitude of roles, and I think it's quite inventive. The stage looks great, so all that. I don't think, and I probably wait the inevitable, Hamilton the movie, when they do decide to adapt it at some point, I think it'll lose some of that essence, some of that magic when you try to stretch it out onto celluloid, because what works on stage doesn't always work on screen, on the big screen. And I think that's kind of the case for me here within the Heights. I think first and foremost, I did like it, but it's too long. It's 2.5 hours long. It's baggy. Having looked, just because I wanted to do a bit of research about the actual stage play after watching the film, it looks like they've opened up the film quite a lot, because you're not stuck within the confines of a stage and what you can and can't do. There's a great sequence in the Heights where they go to a swimming pool, and it kind of arcs back, a note to the kind of that classical kind of side of cinema. I actually have to admit, this is me showing me for who I am. I was thinking more of Austin Powers 2 whenever they've got the music number going on in there. It's all well, it's shot well, it's made with the best of intentions, and it's unrelentingly upbeat. And anyone who knows me, who's listened to this podcast over the years, will know that I am a huge fan of something that unashamedly wears its heart on its sleeve. And that is definitely the case here with this film. It unashamedly wears its heart on its sleeve. It's unrelentingly positive. It's, as I say, it borrows motifs from Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, but it's not in that way that Spike Lee's film preaches at you. And I don't mean that, and I know I'm being very careful of being 30-year-old white man talking about Spike Lee's film preaching. I mean in that sense that Spike Lee, I would say maybe he's mellowed. Well, having watched a couple of his recent films, I don't think so. I think that anger is still there. But Do the Right Thing is a film when Spike Lee, I think, is at times at his angriest in that sense. And I think in a way, like someone like Oliver Stone, sometimes that works at his best. Sometimes that works against him. I love Do the Right Thing. I adore it as a film. But, you know, it is an angry film by Spike Lee. There's not that angriness here. This is just an open showcase of ethnic diversity and multiculturalism. And I really enjoy it. It's just, the problem is it's too long. It's 2.5 hours. It takes a little while to get going. And if you're not going to be with that type of music, that the kind of melodic approach to what they've done with the music, and it's like, hello, my name is Jim. I can't do it, so why am I trying for the second time in this pod? But I like it. I just wished it was shorter, but I would still recommend anybody, if you're a fan of musicals, watch it. Genuinely, I would say give it a choice, give it a chance, because I know it hasn't went. It's another one of those films that's been loved by critics and audiences seem like me or seem to be responding well to it, but it hasn't found an audience. You know, it hasn't found its audience in America. Okay, there was a few. It was maybe about a quarter full last night for a 8:15 screening in Belfast. So it hasn't found a massive audience. I think the problem on that front is that it just lacks star power. Like the actors that are there, I mean, I'm just scrolling down on IMDb. It's Anthony Ramos who's in it. He plays the character US Navy because his father seen the boat US Navy, and that's what he named him after. You've got Corey Hawkins, Leslie Grace, Melissa Barrera. Probably the most notable characters you're going to have in it is Jimmy Smits. He's in there. Mm-hmm. We have Rosa from Stephanie Beatrix from as Carla, you'll know from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and we have Lin-Manuel Miranda is there in a small role. I think that film, it just lacks star power. It's relying on the cult of Hamilton, the cult of the musical itself. I don't know if In the Heights has come across here to the West End in London. I don't know if it ever has. I will say this, from watching the film, I'm definitely tempted, if I ever got the chance, if I ever get back to New York, if it ever comes to the West End, if I got the chance to see it, I would definitely want to watch it. My typical Jim McClean piffy kind of sum up would be like, I loved when it came out Rock of Ages. I don't know, have you seen Rock of Ages, Joe?
Oh God, I hated it.
I did love Rock of Ages because again, it unashamedly had its heart in its sleeve. It had big cheesy tunes on it. Tom Cruise was going for it. I liked it because I had seen the stage play and loved that. And whilst I liked it, like this, I think it loses something in the adaptation. And it's that sense when you take something away from the limitations of the stage, where you have to be inventive, you have to be creative, you have to kind of maximize what you can and can't do with your cast and your cast members and your extras on screen. I think in bringing it to the big screen, it's well-intentioned, it's well-made. There's not a bad song in the feature. I cried twice, but then, as we've already said, I blub quite a lot. I do blub quite a bit at the cinema, and there's a sequence, kind of really poignant sequence, kind of like the kind of finale of the near the finale of the film, or sets in place the events that will set off the finale. I think listening to or watching it, it sounds like that would be where the kind of intermission would come in the stage play adaptation, because there's a joke that's like, shall we take a break? Nah, let's continue. And you're like, fuck it, mate, I need a break. I need to go for a wee. Like, there's another hour of this to go, and we're not even anywhere near the resolution. So yeah, it's a film I have a lot of time for. I'll not repeat myself too much, but I think it's just too long. And I think the essence is still there, but they've that genie in the bottle kind of idea of these musicals that becomes so successful. I think when you've adapted it out from the stage to the big screen, I think you've just lost a little bit of the magic. But that's enough of that. I know, Joe, we are pushed for time, but I know very briefly you wanted to mention you'd seen Nobody, which I still haven't had the chance to watch, but I'm busting to go see.
Yeah. Again, it's sort of, just to sort of go through it quickly, in the same way as Fast 9, it's just unashamed fun. Nobody is unashamed fun. It's basically, you take an ordinary Joe, just to use a term, and you realize he's not all as it seems, and it's just, he's basically John Wick when it comes down to it. And the fact, the genius of it was having someone like Bob Odenkirk play the lead character, and that's someone you would never suspect to be, one of the world's greatest hitmen, underneath the exterior of just being, an ordinary, I think he works as an assistant manager at a warehouse somewhere. It's just a lot of fun. And it's actually got a great supporting cast as well. I think Christopher Lloyd's in it, and it's hard to really just describe. It's one of those things, like, just watch it, because the more I talk about it, the more I potentially spoil it, because I could talk about certain fight sequences and how great they are and why they're great, but that'll just sort of take away from it. Just take my word from it. If you like the sort of action style of the John Wick series and Atomic Blonde, you'll love Nobody for that reason.
You see, I know you don't want to talk too much about it, and I know I haven't seen it, so I don't want to, if I'm going to blunder into a spoiler or not, but just when you mentioned John Wick and you mentioned Atomic Blonde, two films I have soft spots for. I think with John Wick, I do think a lot of people think the character is a lot cooler than what it is. And Atomic Blonde, I think, has potential. I think there's a sequel confirmed for Atomic Blonde. I'm not quite certain. I know this is the point where we just give an honorary shout out to Alan Meeben and go, hey, Alan, we're talking about your film of the year, Atomic Blonde. But as much as I love those films, I do find the action sequences almost too choreographed. Almost kind of like, it sounds like a criticism when it's not really, because I think it's choreographed to perfection, and I can sit back and appreciate what has been attempted to be done. I'm thinking of John Wick. Is it 2 or 3? The last one, Parabellum, baby, where it's just kind of, it is just choreographed to within an inch of its life to perfection. It's both a good thing and a bad thing. I find it too choreographed, and I think it loses a little bit of the tension in that. But is this going to be something similar? Am I going to expect something similar with Nobody, or are we going to get a bit of more crunch?
You know what? More crunch, to be honest with you. And that's why I think it sort of works better than maybe some of the later John Wick films. Because just using the example, the sort of first fight after he sort of comes out of his, stupor and sort of reawakens as to who he was, it's set in a bus, and he is rough around the edges, so it's not like clean punches and stuff like that there. It's just roughy, like he'll miss a punch and he'll sort of half trip over himself and someone will hit him. Like it's a case of, he's not an invincible Superman from the get-go. It's sort of, he grows into himself again the more the fight goes on. So that's another great aspect of it. The fights tell their own story in and of themselves as well. It's not just a case of, there's 5 bad guys, so he's going to like put his head through a window. He's going to like stab him in the neck with a bottle or something out there. It's not just planned out like that there. Each person plays their specific role within the story, within the fight. So I think for that reason, you might warm to it a bit more because of that.
Okay. Well, look, I'm going to have to try and get the opportunity. I know that most cinemas now are screening Fast and Furious 9 at any opportunity they possibly can. So, I might have the chance, if I can get a day off, because I know like even the Odeon have put Nobody even to the dreaded like 12:30 in the afternoon screening slot, which means it might not be staying there too long. I'm surprised it hasn't found a bigger audience, but I've heard nothing but good things by anybody that's got to see it, and both you and another person I know quite well have both described it as a lot of fun. So I'm definitely going to be tempted to give that a viewing. So I think with that, we shall move on and wrap up this week's show with part 3. Okay, so part 3, this is going to be pretty quick, Joe, because you and I haven't been to the cinema that much, and as this feature does grow, we will ask for more engagement from our audience, because we've been away for a while, but as someone once said, we haven't gone away, so we're back now with Podden, and I suppose actually we can actually mention it a little bit after our Cinema Wanker of the Week feature, which will close this podcast unless everybody hates it. A little bit about what we're going to be doing with the future of the pods, because we're making some changes. And we'll talk a bit about that. But Cinema Wanker of the Week, this was a feature that we had many, many years ago when pre-COVID, you would go to cinema, they would be packed out, and there'd usually be that one fucking person who would think it was funny to sit and throw stuff, or in the case of when we went to go see Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, felt it hilarious to sit and throw bread around the cinema screen. And the point we realized it was bread was when my lovely wife heard a plunk in her drink because she had taken the top off, and she looked at it and she's like, there's half a bread roll in my drink. But Cinema Wanker of the Week, it is there. I mean, it was a thing I remember, kind of lockdown 1.0, in between that and 2, going to see Saint Maud with on my own at the Odeon, and it's not an Odeon film, and just watching 3 teenagers, I don't know if they're male or female, I don't know, but they just did not get that film and hated it the whole way through, and actually sat and went, go, what the fuck's this all about? Do you understand this? What the fuck? I don't get this. Fuck this. I thought this would be like The Conjuring was the word. I was like, I should have go see this at the QFT. I've talked. You mentioned Tenet, and I think we did talk about Mr. Smelly Feet on the Tenet podcast, so people will have heard that anecdote from you. But I know when I went to go see Tenet the second time at the Odeon, there was a group of teenagers at the back who just were the worst audience I've ever sitting on their phone, talking, phoning, on YouTube, just not watch it. And it's like, why the fuck did you come see this if you didn't want to watch it? But anyway, so that is the kind of idea of what we're looking from. We used to have some great ones from people who would tweet in or message on Facebook about the various cinema wankers that they've encountered. Because cinemas are back, so too, sadly, will be the wankers. Not in as big a numbers because it's socially distanced. I have 2 little anecdotes that I can very quickly throw at you, Joe. But have you anything that you can say, or I think you mentioned earlier on, all your cinematic experiences to date have been wonderful. You've had no problems with your audience.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough so far since they've reopened. And I hope that trend continues, because I'm hoping to see in the Earth either today or tomorrow. But
that's the QFT. You won't get, you'll get a better class of a QFT of a cinema wanker. They don't do that type of thing. The worst thing, people who go to the QFT are considered cinema wanker of the week because they kind of like cough. And someone goes, oh, please, don't wreck the movie, you bugger.
You charlatan.
You charlatan. How very dare you? This is the home of cinema, don't you know, in Belfast? The home of independent cinema.
It's also the home of Mr. Smellyfoot, because that's where I seen Tenet. There is the old one. And I remember Colour Out of Space, there was 2 teenagers at it, and they're going, oh man, fucking Nicolas Cage, he's going to go mad in this film. And constantly, the whole film saying, oh, he's going to do it now, he's going to do it. And you're like, just watch the fucking thing. Calm down. Just settle yourself. But no, I do have one story, though, from a few years back.
Back in the good old days, back in the pre-COVID.
Back in the movie house days.
Okay. Oh, Joe, too soon. That wound's too soon.
And it's very unfortunate. But it was an afternoon. I think it was off work, and I decided I just want to see Nocturnal Animals. And for anyone who's seen that film, you think, not the best film to bring your child into. But this woman who thought otherwise brought her little child, I think it's not even a child, it was a toddler. It was that young. And I thought, oh God, if they come in the wrong screen by accident, because there was something like, because I honestly thought, something like Sings next door, maybe they meant to go into that instead. No, she was sat down, and then obviously it gives you the blurb. It says, Nocturnal Animals rated 15 for this, that, and the other reason. And the film starts, and for anyone who's seen the film knows it starts with a bunch of women who are either scantily clad or just completely naked dancing.
Bigger lady, if I remember right, yeah.
Oh, that's right. No, yeah, you're right. No, I forgot about that. So they're dancing naked to some, so it's like a Bernard Herrmann score, and it's a bit like David Lynch in a way. It sort of reminded me. So when that's happening, I'm like, oh no, she's going to realize now and she's going to leave. No, she takes out her phone and she starts Snapchatting the whole thing. All the while her toddler's running laps around the screen. Oh. And then eventually when you get to the awful scenes that involve rape and murder, you're like, surely you realize by now. And now at a recent point, the child was just too unruly and kept shouting everywhere. I had to go out and tell an attendant, like, there's a child in there and it's a 15s. I don't think that's sort of allowed. So can you do something about that?
Do you think, Joe, just throwing this out here, that maybe that mother was just taking her child and the child was like, what do you want to go see? Little
Nocturnal
Joe?
Animals.
Nocturnal Animals. It's like, don't you want to go see Sing? No, Nocturnal Animals. I'm a huge David Lynch fan.
Although I was worried. Sorry, I was worried it could have been like an orphan scenario where it's not actually a child. It's just a very small person.
No, Joe, that midget is far away. That person is just small, and this person is just far away.
And they just wanted to do laps around the cinema.
Yeah, they wanted to do it in darkness so no one would poke fun at them.
Aye. Except for me now in hindsight.
Oh, it's okay.
No, it was a child. It was a child, just to let everyone know. It definitely was a child. Because it kept saying, Mommy, Mommy. Mommy,
that would be annoying.
The big naked ladies on the screen.
That would be annoying. It's been a while since I've seen Nocturnal Animals. I think I saw it at the Odyssey and didn't have any such experiences. I thought maybe you would pull on, tell our listeners, I think we've told the story before, about one of our last screenings pre-COVID of The Warriors with a... Because for anyone who doesn't know, and Joe's quite right. I mean, Joe's quite right in doing so. I'm not as brave as I used to be at doing it, but Joe's not afraid to do the old shh during the film. But you maybe shushed the wrong part. You maybe shushed the nobody of Belfast, Joe, without knowing it.
He is a nobody, put it that way, but he's not Bob Odenkirk nobody. No, like you say, it was during the Warrior screen that we done, and it's a group of 3 lads. They were in their 40s, I would say, and they had like their large drink, but within the large drink they decided to put a little more whiskey to what they probably had already pre-drunk. And the whole film, they were just constantly going, oh, there's the bit where this happens. And then they kept repeating lines, and you're like, for fuck's sake, would you ever just shut the fuck up? I don't want to hear your running commentary. Now, if you want to do that, do it in your own living room, fair enough. Just don't do it to the screen.
Joe, I can't even do that in my own living room, because if I do anything like that, I am partial to doing that the odd time, because we watched Heathers the other night with my wife for the first time, and I did kind of throw out a bit of dialogue. Well, fuck me, isn't it? Fuck me gently with a chainsaw. Yeah. What is your damage, Heather? I did throw a few of those out, and Amber just looked at me rather angrily and said, "If we're going to watch a film, you have to be quiet." Like, it was also bad because we rewatched the 3 Austin Powers films because I needed to pick me up, in mid-April, just something to cheer me up, and I put those 3 on and forgot how terribly dated they are already, but also kind of how much unashamedly, and silly they are, fun and silly that they are. But I did kind of turn into like Austin Powers. Oh, behave. So yeah, my wife wouldn't even tolerate that type of behavior at home. But I cut across your wonderfully, I was going to say drug fueled, but hopefully it wasn't drug. Booze filled joy of one of our cult classic screenings at the Warriors. Of the Warriors.
But, so I was telling them, can you please be quiet? And then at one point, they'd stop for about a minute or 2, and then they just start like nothing had happened before. And then the shushing began, and then he just like drunkenly turned around and he had his head stooped and he was going, "You telling me shush again, I'll put you in your head." And I was just kind of looking at him stunned as if to say, how are you going to put me on my head? You can barely stand up. And then sure enough, when the film did end, they tried to stand up, and one of them was just so drunk he like half fell into the wall, and he kept bobbing back and forth and back and forth. But another thing about that screen, and I don't know if you remember somebody had opened a bottle of champagne.
Yeah.
Because you could hear the wine corks going. But no, other than that, still have fun with the screen. I'm glad we did it. But sometimes they're just marred by the odd asshole.
And there we go, dear listeners, is why you should come to a Banterflix screening when they restart, because that is the type of clientele, classy clientele that we bring. So
get some champers.
Yeah, some champers. Do you know, on that note, though, I know I was speaking to Chris Gray, who's been on this podcast and on the TV show a couple of times, and I know he's actually made the point that since the movie house is closed, the Odeon has definitely got a different audience now, or to an extent a different audience, because they found quite a few empty tins and a few bottles of alcohol now that they wouldn't have found in as many as big a quantity in the cinema at the Odeon now, because it is the only Belfast city centre now, or no, it is the only it is the only cinema in Belfast city centre now. And he said since the movie house is closed, they've definitely noticed a change in the clientele. I know last night in the Heights, I definitely heard the distinct sound of someone opening something. I don't know what it was. I don't think it was a tin, because come on, it's in the Heights, it's classy. I think it was wine. I'm not certain, but you know, I can't say I've never done it, you know, so I'm not going to sit and say I'm not going to pretend to say I would never do such a thing. Never. But anyway, my cinema wankers of the week are more recent. They are since the grand reopening 3.0. One of them you know already, because as I mentioned earlier, my lovely wife and I went to see Cruella because I've been busting to go see it. I've heard a lot of good reviews. I said I liked it. My wife was not as big a fan of it as I was, and I say it was quite packed. There was a group of like 3-4 teenage girls sitting right behind us. I know my lovely wife was getting annoyed because one of them kept kicking the seat behind her, and they were talking quite a lot to each other, and they were kind of sharing their little commentary. It was like the worst director's commentary you've ever heard. And I don't know what happened, whether it was a group that the group of them had just decided to go see something, but there is a point where I think there's Estella and there's Cruella. And we have Emma Stone playing the two characters. Estella is kind of before Cruella. Cruella's a creation who she adopts as her coping mechanism. As I say, kind of alarm bells about kind of Joker similarities are kind of going off in my head. But there is a point where we have the reveal of Cruella de Vil. And this girl just behind me, just at the top of her voice, quite loudly to her friend said, "Who does she think she is? Cruella de Vil or something?" And you were like, That's. I really wanted to turn around and go, that's the whole fucking point of this film. It's called Cruella. I mean, did you just think it just happened to be called Cruella? A coincidence? It was called Cruella, and all the references to the Dalmatians and all that stuff would be in there just by chance. I don't know. I just sit there and go, I feel a bit like Ferris Bueller, Joe. I weep for the future. Whenever there's someone going in, she's bought a ticket for Cruella, not realizing it's about Cruella de Vil. And I turned to her friend halfway through it and went, "Who does she think she is? Cruella de Vil or something?" And you're like, yeah, she actually does. She thinks she's Cruella de Vil because she fucking is Cruella de Vil. But anyway, that was Rumble number 1. Rumble number 2, as we all know now, it's socially distant screenings at the cinema, so it's assigned seating, and cinemas before that didn't have assigned seating have had to do it now. And last night when we went to see In the Heights, there was a couple sitting, and as I mentioned, it was quite busy, so people who were clearly queuing to get their popcorn and various shite had to wait a bit longer, and a couple came in, and into the cinema, there was still the trailer, so they hadn't been too late, and they literally went over to the person and was like, I think you're sitting in our seat. I think you're sitting in our seat. And they were like looking up at them going, like, you could hear like, what do you want us to do? And it's like, well, it's our seat. It's and they kind of like, they move, but then they did the thing. And I mean, I can't, well, this is pre-COVID, so I can kind of say it wasn't that bad. Many years ago, I remember sitting at the Odeon in an empty screening. It was me and someone else. A friend went to see something. We sat in the premier seats when we shouldn't have sat in the premier seats, but there was nobody else in there. We hadn't realized we had accidentally sat because another couple came in. A couple came in and like, "Oh, you're sitting on our seats, mate." And you're like, "All right, sorry." So we just moved like 3 seats over And you're like, okay. But anyway, that's enough. But so I've done that. But these people last night, they were like, okay. So they moved like 2 seats over. And as my wife made the point, it's like, well, they've sat on those seats, so they're not desanitized. If it would be me, I'd have maybe went in and not complain, but got a wet wipe out and cleaned it, because that's the whole point of social distancing. You're preventing the spread of the dreaded Delta variant. And anytime I think of Delta, I think of Delta City, and I think RoboCop's going to come and save the day. But dead or alive, creep, you're coming with me. But sorry, tangent. And they moved, and it just so happened my cousin had went to see the film as well. Do you ever have that weird moment when someone goes to cinema and you know them, and you're like going, "Is that so and so? Is that?" And then you literally, just before the film started, you go bed and text my cousin and go, "We're sitting behind you." Ooh. So they just happened to move, like pretty much, and sat right beside him. And Ben was like, social distance much? So they just got up and moved and just sat somewhere completely kind of random, where they just decided there was no other seats. So if it is social distancing, not only have they contaminated somebody else's seats, they then tried to move into somebody else's social bubble, and then they just sat somewhere else where they weren't meant to sit. And you're just like, fucking, all you had to do was, when you got your ticket, read what number it is.
Plus they tell you on the way in. That's the thing. Yeah. Now they just remind you, you're like G8 to 10 or whatever it is. Yeah. So it's hard to fucking not know.
And you're just like, you are my cinema wanker of the week. If you just, it is assigned seating. And I mean, I've never had an issue with assigned seating. I never have. I mean, as I've clearly just said, in the past, I haven't always kind of stuck to it. But when a cinema screening is pretty much empty, and you're like, fuck it, I'm just going to sit in the comfier seats at the frontier. No, they'll never know. But I was just like, with everything going on at the minute, it's like, come on, guys, just, don't be a cinema wanker. Read your ticket, see where your sitting is, and just sit in your fucking seats. You've picked them. So you've obviously picked going, yeah, that's where I'll sit. Because that's the thing. You come up and you get the ticket, kind of the seating plan. You go, where's the screen? Oh, we'll go there. And you go, you've obviously picked those seats. So I don't know. But yeah. And then I laughed. It was because they left their drinks. They left their drink up beside my cousin, and then he brought them their drink down. So it was like, how did Ben, my cousin, for anyone, I don't know why you need to know his name, but how did my cousin get COVID? Being a nice guy, just giving them this Fanta. So yeah, you're my cinema wanker of the week. Hopefully, well, I feel like this is a bit of a double-edged sword. Hopefully we get more cinema wanker content, but hopefully I kind of hope we don't, because I want people to be good and respectful. Like, we've talked about this. We were talking about A Quiet Place Part 2 earlier on. Like, there's a difference with cinema wankers. Cinema wankers are people that are annoying, and just, you go, seriously, why did you even bother coming to see this? You get the other person. Like, there's a scene, and we talked about this on, I think, just on his random Zoom call, Joe, when I went to see A Quiet Place Part 2 with my lovely wife. There's a scene on a not going into spoilers, there's a scene on a train, and the way the sequence is shot up, that there's a character who's moving their head forward and back. Forward and back. I feel like I'm going into JFK there. Forward and back.
Back into the left.
Back into the left. Back into the left. But the character's moving back and forth. And that at one point, there's a reason you've got that particular shot in frame, is because when that character moves their head, there's going to be something in the background in shot. Everybody knows that. Everybody, even that toddler at that screening of Nocturnal Animals, would be, I know what's coming. And when it finally happened, there was this loud Belfast voice of a young girl who felt the need to shout out, "I fucking knew it!" And you're just like, did you really need to say it?
Yeah.
It didn't bother me, because you were just like, oh, well, it's nice with an audience again. It didn't annoy me that much, but you were just like, really? Did you need to say it out loud? Everybody knew it. But anyway, that is kind of what we're looking for from our cinema wankers of the week. That's what we want, Joe. We want cinema wanker gold. Well,
you can have the opposite, cinema hero, for similar circumstances. Like, just going back to John Wick 3, the moment that John Wick used a horse to kill someone, there was a fella in the back going, "Oh, here we fucking go." And I was like, that's just magical. Everyone even applauded in that at the time. It's one of the best things I've ever experienced in the cinema. Just the sight of Keanu Reeves using a horse to kill someone just sparked joy in that fella in the back row. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And it really did. I think that's what sort of made me love the film even more than maybe it deserved.
So there we go, Joe. We're going to have Cinema Hero of the Week and Cinema Wanker of the Week. There we go. And hopefully we will get more Cinema Heroes and less Cinema Wankers. Because hopefully now, with this age now where you can choose to, like something like Cruella, watch it at home if you so wish, you know, the Cinema Wankers will stay away. And only the people who want to be there, who actually want to watch the film, will be there at the screen. And it'll not just be a babysitting service. It'll not just be somewhere to put to. It's not just your living room on a slightly larger scale. You know, that's what we hope. So we can only hope and aspire for better in 2021. And I think on that note, Joe, I think we'll wrap up this pod. But just before we do, I know we mentioned this. We're making some changes with the podcast. Before, everything has been under the We Need to Talk About Movies feed. We're going to be changing all that. Joe, you do host. You co-host alongside your fellow sleuth sister, Therese Ray.
Oh, yes.
You do the Crime Scene to Screen podcast. I know Gabrielle Ridio does. The name has been a bowl of contention between the two of us. It has been cosplay, movie screen to cosplay scene. We can never get it right, so we're just going to rejig that name to Talk and Cosplay. I think that's much easier for everyone to remember. Gabrielle's been doing that for a while now. You've done Crime Scene. I think you're about 6 or 7 episodes into Crime Scene. I know Victoria and I do. We need to talk about Disney Pod as well, and I know Darren has just got a load of ideas. Darren is just WhatsApping me random ideas. He's just turned into like the Matthew McConaughey kind of in Wolf of Wall Street, kind of, I've got this idea, and it's just kind of going into, I don't know where I was going with that. I don't know. But yes, we have a lot of podcasts, a lot of content in the We Need to Talk About Movies RSS feed. It's a geeky thing. But what's going to be happening is those podcasts will be getting their own feeds. So, Joe, technically, you and Therese will have your own podcast, free from the shackles of We Need to Talk About Movies constraints. It'll be monthly, just like it is at the minute, but instead of listing all in one place, you can watch them all in one place on our Banterflix Facebook page. But if you want to listen to them, if you're a listener, the only places you'll be able to get them all in one place is on our Patreon account and on the various podcast streams. Joe, what have you lined up for July for Crime Scene to Screen?
Well, we just recently will have released the Heavenly Creatures episode, which was quite, well, when I say these are quite fun to do, they're quite interesting, I should say. But next we are going to look at Fritz Lang's M. We're going, to dip our toes in the classic. And we are going to look at the true crime that inspired it, which was Peter Curtin, aka the Vampire of Dusseldorf. And it is a nasty tale, but it was picked by our guest Victoria, so it's entirely all Victoria's fault, we're going to say, just as a heads up for any listeners.
Okay, so it sounds like upbeat, kind of your traditional kind of what we get from Crime Scene to Screen, where we get upbeat, joyous content and not just silly content that we get on this feed, like Cinema Hero and Cinema Wanker of the Week. So you've got that to look forward to. I know Gabrielle has a podcast we've recorded quite some time ago. Her next podcast will be talking to Stephen from Nightly Creations and Kiefer from Multiple Jacks. I'm assuming that's not Kiefer Sutherland, sadly, but maybe it is. We don't know whose people's cosplay alter egos is. If you haven't listened to the podcast before, they are a lot of fun, and they do, in their own little weird way, get kind of deep and meaningful and kind of showcase there's a lot more going on than cosplay than just kind of getting in and out of costume. So you've that to look forward to. There will be a few more coming as well, but you'll still have the unashamedly nonsensical content that is usually created when I'm at the helm of the main podcast. So that's really enough of that. Check out the Facebook page and check out the website. You'll find the complete back catalogue of all the podcasts on the website. You'll find info about our Patreon page and all the other stuff. And also check out our Dark Hedges International Film Festival website, because that's going to be re-kicking back into life. We've kind of let that go into stasis for a little while, and we're coming out and we're going to build up for the festival in October. Joe, anything else you want to say before you go?
No, that's pretty much everything. So other than thanks for having me on, Jim.
Yeah, that's always a pleasure, Mr. McElroy. So I will let you go back and rub butter all over your feet as you prefer for your first post on OnlyFans on OnlyFeet. Yep. So thank you for listening. Thanks again, Joe, and we'll be back soon with another podcast. But for now, until then, goodbye.
This has been We Need to Talk About Movies. Thanks for listening. For more information, visit banterflix.com. See you next time.